So firstly, I would say I'm really, really happy to be back in Tel Aviv. I'm very fortunate at the moment that I come here maybe once every quarter to work with a very interesting German business who is called Energy, one of the sponsors. And what they are doing is they've created an outpost in Tel Aviv to try and actually bring to life some of the things that I will speak to you about when it comes to how do you put the innovation spark back into big corporations. That light's very bright. I was on the beach yesterday in Tel Aviv and it wasn't even that hot. But anyway, let's go on. So what I want to leave you with today, there are no slides, are really 5 critical ideas. And I'm not saying that all of these ideas are right for your business. It depends on where a business is at its stage of growth, the challenges it's facing. But really the 5 lessons come from my work at eBay, PayPal, Skype, in a variety of roles in the early days, and then also once those businesses grew. I then started working with big corporations who really struggle to keep pace with all the change that we heard about this morning. And so these 5 lessons, or what I call the 5 shifts, that big corporations need to make if they want to keep the innovation spark alive, really also come from the likes of Google, Airbnb, and Uber. So how did they unlock significant growth? So let me start with the first shift that a big corporation needs to make if it wants to keep the innovation spark alive. The first one is no surprise to any of you, I'm sure, but it is the shift moving away from hierarchy, which is very common in European organizations, and I mean in Israel, I know there's much more bottom-up influence and discussion in corporations, but the first shift really is moving from hierarchy, shifting to what is called embracing crowds, communities, and networks. So what does that practically mean? Let's take an example of this German business who set up an outpost in Tel Aviv, Berlin, London, and Silicon Valley. And why did they do that? To surround them with a community, the startup community, who can actually help them to destroy their 150-year-old business model. The key first shift is recognizing that all the great ideas in corporations won't necessarily come from within, but increasingly they come from the outside, whether it's the startup community, whether it's academics. So that is the first major shift. The second shift really is away from being short-term focused on financial planning to much more being focused on having a real strong reason for why your business exists. So having what is called a massive transformational purpose, being really clear about why you exist and how you are going to change the world. And why is this shift important? Well, it's really important if we look at millennials, if we look at younger people today. They really want to work for corporations, and even older generations want to work for corporations where they feel they're making a difference, they're changing the world, they're doing something that hasn't been done before. So very important, therefore, is to be very explicit about your massive transformational purpose. So Google's massive transformational purpose is organizing the world's information. No matter how big or small your business, it's important to have that clearly articulated to attract the right talent, but also to make sure that everything you do is in service of that massive transformational purpose. And what you need to do is use data, measurement, and insight very differently. So instead of long-term financial planning, you need to look at data, insight, customer feedback much more regularly to understand whether what you're actually doing in your business is contributing to achieving that massive transformational purpose. So from crowds, communities, and networks to massive transformational purpose is the second one. And then I'm sure, being in Israel, the third one is not really new for you, but a lot of big corporations don't do it. So the third shift, if you want to keep the innovation spark alive, is really moving from long-term planning to experimentation and giving people autonomy. So really failing fast, fail often, failing quickly, even as far as strategy is concerned, getting out there and trying things. And that in itself is very important, but what is even more important is actually giving employees at all levels the autonomy, the right to fail, to try and to experiment. So no more longer term planning, really shifting towards autonomy and experimentation. As an aside, autonomy is really important. Who here has seen anything by a guy called Dan Pink? So Dan Pink, right? He does a lot of work on the surprising truth about what motivates people. Yes, money goes some way, but the reason autonomy is important is actually that is a much bigger motivator than money. So once money is off the table, you feel fairly treated, compensated. What really gets the best out of people, keeps that innovation spark alive, is giving people, inspiring them intrinsically. So giving them autonomy, giving them this massive purpose I mentioned, and then also, like you all know, having them work with really cool and interesting people on really amazing projects. So experimentation is the third one. The next one is all about innovation. So if you want to keep the innovation spark alive in your organization, don't try and do it from within or looking at what happened in the past. What did we do in the past? What went wrong? How can we improve on that? Really, increasingly, big corporations who want to keep that spark alive acknowledge that actually innovation needs to happen at the edges. So for instance, this big German business I work with, or if I think back of my days at Skype, a lot of the innovation doesn't happen in the big body of the corporation. It is about creating a little team on the edge that can be like a black ops team, have a strong brief to come up with new business models, and is not weighed down by the legacy, by the bureaucracy of the big existing corporation. So that's one interpretation of innovation at the edges. The second interpretation is a very interesting one. It also says that if you are looking for innovation, don't look within, don't look at the past, put it at the edges, but also look at the edges. So whether you are a FMCG business, whether you're an energy business, look outside your sector, look in unusual places, look in other sectors, and really find the trends that are happening there and bring them into your world. So that's the fourth shift. And then the last one is really, really critical. And it's no surprise. The fifth shift is all about having an open leadership mindset. Now that sounds very easy, and we heard some comments at the beginning. We've heard the word mindset a few times today. And I'm always intrigued about what does mindset actually mean? How can we measure whether someone has an open mindset or not? And for me, mindset has three components. Mindset is all about what you think, what you feel, what you see, and then ultimately what you do. So a lot of great leaders in big corporations have very positive intent. We will make innovation happen. We will become digital. But the challenge is that they don't have the correct mindset that can help them move from knowing one thing, knowing I need to do something, to actually doing it. And so a lot of time is wasted in corporations where there is a lot of talk about digitalization, about innovation. But the big, big challenge is that people really struggle to move from knowing to doing because we haven't tried to unlock a mindset in them that really thinks, sees, and feels very differently. So in short, as I was saying, These are the 5 shifts. I think some of the best examples of where it is happening at the moment is happening in larger businesses, as you know, who come here, set up accelerators, et cetera, and the key point, though, is that I'm not saying you have to make all 5 these shifts in one go if you are a big, massive corporation. That really is difficult. Your business might not be ready. But actually, if you're able to make 1 or 2 of these shifts very, very quickly, that spark will be kept alive. And then the last thing I wanted to leave you with, in terms of really helping big organizations focus appropriately on the innovation spark, is being really clear in a business which innovation horizon you are focusing on. Are you guys familiar with the 3 horizons of innovation? Okay, let me tell you a little bit about them. So, for breakthrough innovation to thrive, it's very important in a corporation to segment what type of innovation, which part of your organization focuses on. So the 3 horizons really are, Horizon 1 innovation tends to be product, process improvements, small tweaks at what already exists. Horizon 2 innovation starts tweaking at the edges, but not yet disrupting the existing business models. So it could be investments in new products, could be investments in new businesses, but not yet that disruption that can actually fundamentally disrupt a big corporation's business model. And Horizon 3 is the disruption, the way out innovation at the edges. Now, every corporation, if it wants to keep that spark alive, actually needs to be very, very thoughtful around who is focused on which horizon of innovation, number 1. And secondly, it's really, really important that the leaders of an organization spend most of their time in Horizon 3, but that they source, so the disruptive ideas, that's where they should be thinking. But where they should source their ideas from should be from within the organization and at the edges of innovation, as I mentioned. So in short, let me summarize again for you. Keeping the innovation spark alive, 5 easy things. 1, well, not so easy, but they're easy. So 5 things. 1, move from hierarchy to crowds, communities, and networks. Secondly, have a massive transformational purpose. Try and change the world so that you can attract the best people who want to change the world with you. Thirdly, experiment, 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 and give people autonomy to do so. 4th, well, find that innovation at the edge and in other sectors. And 5th, cultivate a mindset that is open and willing to not only think and speak about innovation, but actually doing it and allowing people in your organization to do it. And then lastly, be really, really clear with your resources and time as to where you focus different people in the organization on, whether it's Horizon 1, Horizon 2, or Horizon 3 innovation. So without slides, I tried to give you a bit of structure. I'm going to be around later if anybody wants to have a chat. But I wanted to give you a very high-level flavor and happy to share with you all the mistakes I made and the lessons I learned. But herewith, I think I'll hand over to the next speaker.